we are going to go over the different ways that we can multiply polynomials. So go ahead and copy down the guided practice. We're going to go through 4 different methods that we can use to multiply polynomials, and towards the end of the notes, you're going to be able to identify which of these methods is your favorite method to use. No matter which of these 4 methods you use, you should still get to the same answer every time. So go ahead and pause the screen and copy down the first 2 problems. And then go ahead and pause the screen and copy down the last 2 methods. All right, so we're going to start with the vertical method. So I have 2 examples for each. One where we have our polynomial, or in this case, more specifically, we have a binomial multiplied by a monomial. So in this case, with the vertical method, it's set up just like normal multiplication, where we have the term with the most amount of terms at the top, and we have the smallest amount of terms at the bottom. So we still have x plus 1 multiplied by 2x. So just like normal, we're going to multiply 2x by 1 first and get 2x. And then I'm going to multiply 2x times x, and I would get 2x squared. And since the 2x is positive, we're going to put a plus sign in the middle. So that would be our answer. And then moving over to our next example with the vertical method. This time we have 2 binomials multiplied together. They both have 2 terms. So we still set it up the same way. The only difference is that we're going to be multiplying this 7 by -1 and x. And then we're going to move over and multiply this x by -1 and x, just like we would with normal multiplication. So first off, I'm going to do 7 times -1 and get -7. Then I'm going to do 7 times x and get 7x. Then I'm going to move over to my x term, and I'm going to move over to the place value that has the x there, just like we would with normal multiplication. So I'm going to say x times -1 and get -x. And then I have x times x, which gives me x squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and, just like with normal multiplication, add my 2 layers together, or my 2 levels. My -7 doesn't have a like term. 7x minus an x gives me 6x, and my x squared doesn't have a matching term. Since my 6x is positive, I'm going to put a plus sign in between. So that would be our answer for that one. So that's the vertical method. We set it up and multiply just like normal multiplication. Next, we're going to take a look at the horizontal method. The horizontal method is kind of just like normal distribution. So all I'm going to do with this first example is I'm just going to take that term on the outside, and I'm going to multiply it by everything on the inside. So just be careful with that, because I do have 2 x's here. So that means I'm going to add the exponents because I am multiplying. Since there are no exponents here, there's 1, so 1 plus 1 gives me 2, so this should be 2x squared. And then 2x times +1 gives me positive 2x. So that's just using the normal distribution method. It looks a little bit different when we have our binomials here. If you guys take a look, I separated out this x minus 1, and I first multiplied x by x plus 7, and then I went ahead and did -1 times x plus 7. So we're still distributing here, but all we did was we broke up that first parentheses so that we're doing our multiplication all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute the x term, and then I'm going to distribute that -1. So when I do that, I'm going to get x times x gives me x squared. X times 7 gives me positive 7x. -1 times x gives me -x. -1 times 7 gives me -7. And then from there, all I'm going to do is combine my like terms, which here my like terms are 7x and -x. So my final answer would be x squared plus 6x minus 7. So this one is pretty much normal distribution. The only difference is that when we have two binomials, I'm going to have to multiply the x by everything inside, and I have to multiply the -1 by everything inside. So that's why we broke up that first parentheses to do our multiplication twice. So those are the vertical and horizontal method. Next, we're going to take a look at the FOIL method. What that stands for is first, outside, inside, last. So our first terms are going to be the ones in the front of the parentheses. So that's our f, x times x. And then our next in the parentheses is going to be our O, which stands for outside. So those are the ones on the outside of the parentheses. So that's our O, and that's going to be x times 7. Then we're going to do our I, which stands for inside, which are those two that are inside the parentheses. So that's -1 times x. And then our last one is going to be last. So those are our two last numbers in our parentheses. So that's -1 times 7. And then from there, all we do is simplify. X times x is x squared. 7 times x is 7x. And then -1 times x is -x. And then -1 times 7 is -7. So again here, all we do is combine our like terms. So we've got x squared, 7 minus x gives me 6x, and then -7 at the end. So that's pretty much the distribution that we did before. The only difference is we didn't rewrite it. We left them the way they were, and we just did our arrows to find our first, outside, inside, last. This last method is the box method, and this one is my favorite just because it organizes the work a little bit easier. So all I've done here is I've created a box. My first term goes on the left-hand side, and my second factor goes on the top. So I have 2 times x, which is going to give me 2x squared, and then I have 2x times 1, which is going to give me 2x. I don't have any like terms, so that is my final answer. Since the 2x is positive, I'm going to put a plus. And then on the next one, same deal, except for this time I have a binomial first. So x minus 1, I have x and -1, and then x plus 7, x plus 7. So here in each of these boxes, I'm going to multiply the sides of the box to make the product. X times x gives me x squared. X times 7 gives me 7x. -1 times x gives me -x. And -1 times 7 gives me -7. And then from there, I'm just going to combine my like terms, which are my two x terms. So I've got x squared, -x and 7x gives me 6x, and then -7.